You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Girl Scouts of Central Indiana, Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle or me at leadersandlegends.net. And as always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Thank you for joining us on the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is special in a way that most folks, quite frankly, aren't. We were lucky enough to interview a member of his brotherhood a couple of years ago for our podcast, and that's Sammy Davis. But today it's Donald Doc Ballard. He's a retired colonel of the Kansas National Guard and a former member of the United States Navy. But as a hospital corpsman in the Vietnam War, he received the Medal of Honor for his heroic actions on May 16, 1968. He also received 3 Purple Hearts for his service to his country. Doc Ballard, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Well, before we get started in your story and talk about that day and how you're helping veterans, let's quickly transition to that. You are in Indianapolis. What brings you into town, and why is the service to veterans so much a part of your life?
Well, it's always been part of my life. I've been a health care provider most of my adult life. I entered the service as a pre-med major in dentistry, and I wanted to make a career out of the military because I wanted to service the military, to be a dentist within. At that point, it was the Navy. I joined the Navy to be a Navy dentist, and so ever since that time, throughout my adult life, I've been a caregiver and caretaker, and so it's natural for me to find respect and want to honor the people that saved my life. A time in combat will change your opinion for the rest of your life. And, I'm just a small town kid that left Kansas City to go get my education and ended up on the battlefield killing people. I had no intention of killing people. Unfortunately, I had to. I killed 6 men. 3 of them was with my knife. So, how do you expect me to come home and be the same guy? As you recall, Vietnam vets coming home were not received very well. It was
Correct.
A poor time in our society. And so dealing with that, I decided that the only brothers that I truly had were veterans that understood how and why I did what I did. And so it just grew out of love and respect that I would want to be around veterans and help them because they were there to help me.
Indianapolis, Indiana too, but Indianapolis especially is known for its veterans and its war memorials, how it honors veterans. Has Indianapolis been a stop for you previous in your career, in your life?
Not really, no. Many years ago, 30 years ago maybe, I was up here at a brick factory taking a tour. I had an interest in playing in the clay, and learning how bricks were made. So, but other than that, no, I've never been here before.
Is there a specific kind of reason, anything that the Leader and Legends podcast audience can help you do while you're in town? A cause we can support?
For sure. I mean, the real purpose is that we're trying to start an initiative to change pretty much the entire look and feel of the American Legion posts across the country. We're starting here in Indianapolis with Post 500. So many times the younger kids don't want to join an old fogey's organization, where it's made up of smoking and drinking and storytelling and just BS. So, we have to look at it from a different perspective, and we have to look at what their needs are and try to fulfill their desires. Unlike when we came home, they didn't want us to join the Legion or the Vietnam veterans to join anything, because we had lost the wars, so to speak. And it was disheartening. So part of that learning curve is that we don't leave anybody behind. Now, they say that's a good buzzword, but they left us out. They left the Vietnam guys behind, didn't want us. So I've made a special effort, being a Vietnam guy, that we changed the attitude of the country when we changed the pendulum and the direction of the pendulum with the attitude of the community. When a veteran would come home in uniform, we would stand up and clap and praise him and give him the honors that he deserves. And the sheeple would follow us. They didn't know why we were clapping or why we were giving praise, but the sheeple all of a sudden jumped up and started supporting us. So we, one by one, individuals can make a difference in this country if we just put our mind and get mind to it, as well as get some good direction and good goals. And so that's what our goal is here today, is to help the American Legion recruit membership through education. We'd like to have to expand on the American Legion's education theme now. They already have one. So we're trying to embellish that and expand it throughout the country and give them a better presence and a more acceptable attitude towards the newer veterans.
Let's go back to something you said just a few seconds ago. A lot of folks are folks who paid attention either because they've read about it or lived through it, kind of understand to a certain degree why veterans, that's not true, how veterans were treated post-Vietnam. And some of that was passive, right? They didn't honor them the way that like World War II vets, for example, were honored. But what you're describing is almost an active discrimination. So when you came out of Vietnam, a Medal of Honor recipient, and all those other brave men, it was actively discouraged for you guys to join the American Legion or the VFW?
Yes. And to expand on that, when we got off the plane from Vietnam in California, we were met by protesters. And we had cups of urine thrown on us. We had dog feces thrown at us and hit us in our uniforms. And, we were disheartened because, we did everything we could, what we thought was the best interest of the country, only to come home and find out the country wasn't behind us. So pretty disheartening. We were not allowed to wear our uniform off base. Think of that. I mean, how dishonorable is that, So we had to actually take our uniform off or cover it if we were going to go off base on Liberty or something. The guards wouldn't let you off in uniform.
And now when people see Americans in uniform at the Cracker Barrel or someplace, they pick up their check.
Yes. I mean, but that was through an effort to the most part, it was to the effort of the Vietnam vets that said, we're not going to let that happen to the new kids. So we took the initiative, as I mentioned, one by one, each of us did our part to try to change the attitude of the civilians.
It's been my great fortune to know while I was in the Army from 87 to 90, there were plenty of Vietnam vets still in the service at that point, a lot of whom who had gotten out after Vietnam and then rejoined. But through my work in politics or PR or podcasting, I've met several other Vietnam vets. What makes that era of veterans stand apart? Not better or worse, just different.
Well, a lot of it's got to do with our upbringing and our belief system and our toys that we grew up with and the lack of distractions that the kids use today to check out of reality. We were taught by the Second World War veterans how to take responsibility for our actions, how to become a patriot, how to become a better American citizen. And I'd have to say that as a parent and as an adult, we failed the new kids. As we literally have not taught them the values that we were taught. They're not as tough as kids as we were, you know. They strive to get a star by their name, you know, acceptance. And rather than team playing, it's all about more individuality than meeting the goals and mission statements.
You mentioned why you joined the service and then what you ended up doing while you were in the service. When you got over to Vietnam, kind of what were your thoughts? I mean, Vietnam by that time you were in 65, I think. Is that when you went there?
No,
I joined in 65?
I joined the Navy in 1965, and it was 67, the latter part of 67. I'd already served with the Marines during 67, so I was indoctrinated into the FMF world, Fleet Marine Force. So the Marines were quick to. The Marines have got a good training program, and if you pay attention, you got a good chance of living. If you don't, then you're history. So the fact that I had several months with the Marines before I was sent to Vietnam, I believe that was to my advantage. And even though we didn't go over as a unit, I was augmented over as an individual. I knew nobody else on the plane, and the same was true when I came home. But going over there, all the units had already been activated. They were in place. And so now the fillers would come and replace the dead guys. And that's what we were fillers.
You joined to be a dentist eventually to get the training and all that.
Correct.
You end up becoming a Navy corpsman?
Yes.
This is the question I've asked other Vietnam vets. At what point, apropos for you, of course, while you were deployed, did the, well, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore moment hit you?
Well, I'd say the first step is the yellow footprints. You know, when you first get into boot camp and there's nobody there that cares about you, and that their intent is to break you down. You know, to put every test they can muster together to see if they can break you, and that's pretty enduring. And then your first assignment, it's a little easier because now you've got a mission, you got a job, and you're around friendlier people. You know, it's not the boot camp attitude any longer. So then the next step would be learning your job to the best of your ability and learning that skill that makes you an asset to the unit. And so you spend the rest of your life living up to those values and the skill set, and then learning leadership skills so you can, lead instead of follow.
Vietnam, I can't think of a place, perhaps. I'm sure there are others, maybe Antarctica, that is different than the state in which you grew up. Just being over there and interacting with the people. And, the one thing about basic training especially is they throw people from all over the country in the same building, same room, same barracks, and say, help each other, figure it out.
Right.
Is that something you experienced when you were in Vietnam, that everyone's like, we all want to get home alive, let's help each other?
the team was quite obvious in Vietnam. None of us, even today, can function as an individual. We do so much better when we function as a team member. Vietnam was a perfect example. It was us against them. Who are them? I mean, we don't know. Mm-hmm. And if you talk to 10 different Vietnam guys, veterans, you would come up with 10 different stories, because we all experienced different warfare, different enemies, different terrain features. I've been asked, well, why is your story different than everybody else's? And that's the main reason is none of us saw the exact same thing unless we were in the same unit. Mm. So the camaraderie, the love, the need for fellowship and companionship and trust was a big part of survival in Vietnam. When I got there, I didn't care whether the North or South was winning or the Democrats or Republicans. My entire life and my mission was to get the Marines home as best a condition as I could back to their loved ones. That was my sole job. And if that meant risking my life, then so be it.
You are listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today is Doc Ballard. He received the Medal of Honor for his heroic actions in Vietnam in May of 1968. Did you have a strong stomach before you went to Vietnam? What prepared you for the carnage that you saw?
I don't think I was prepared. My first day in Vietnam, to go to the field, I spent a couple of days in the rear when I first got there. But my first day that I was put on a chopper and we were sent out to my assignment, we got shot down. And the senior corpsman that came to get me was wounded in both legs and both arms. So I had to medevac him out. So I went from junior kid on the block to senior man in the outfit. Mm. And luckily we were on a resupply mission to a Marine Corps base when we got shot down. So when the bird crashed, we were within reach of the Marines. The Marines came and helped us get back into their base camp. And so we sit there until we could get another bird. And people don't understand that birds don't fly every day. Weather and a lot of things, enemy activity. There's a lot of things that prevent a bird from flying. In that case, I was proud to say, and there's not much I can say good about Vietnam, except I'm real proud to say that we brought all that medical training home with us, and the people here in the citizenry of this state have benefited from the Vietnam War. And you ask how? Well, we learned how to treat casualties, trauma, and how to change our entire attitude. Prior to Vietnam, it was scoop and run by the local fire departments. They had first aid men. And we were not afforded that ability because we had no ground ambulances. So we had to depend on the helicopter. Again, so the whole golden hour was designed. Airway management was designed. Everything to keep the patient alive. And the term was stabilization before transportation. That's what was created in 1967 and 68 when we had no means of evacuation except for the helicopter. So we brought that home and taught it. I was one of the first EMT paramedics in my state. The state did not recognize our training by the licensing, but everybody that taught the course knew we knew more than the people teaching the course. So when I first got out of the service, I could do a cricoid thyroidotomy, tracheostomy, guillotine amputation, arterial and venous cut down, but I couldn't carry a bedpan without supervision in the civilian life. I worked orthopedic surgery and neurosurgery, so I was thankful that I had the training because I was able to save more lives in the field than a typical medic or a corpsman was.
In 65, was there still the draft?
Yes, because I got my draft notice.
And then you decided to join?
No, I got it while I was in Vietnam. I told my sergeant, hey, I got a draft notice. I got to go home. And he says, here's your straw. Suck it up, big guy.
There's a famous, he's famous. He's very respected and successful fellow here in Indianapolis who I'd love for you all to meet at some point. His name is Michael Browning. And he's come on the podcast, very famous businessman, and he graduated from Notre Dame. And he got his mother brought his induction notice to the graduation ceremony. Son, I'm proud of you. Here's your induction notice.
Your friends and neighbors have selected you. Yeah,
Go ahead, please.
Well, they didn't. The selection service, we all signed up when we were supposed to back then. And my mother got the notice because I didn't have an address, prior to that. I did get married, and I had 2 kids while I was in Vietnam. So, but I never kept my records up, so my mother, through the Selective Service Board, got the notice, and she forwarded it over to me, and, you might get it a month later, but it was humorous to get my draft notice and while I was sitting in Vietnam.
Do you know your draft number?
No.
I've heard from multiple people of your generation that you never forget. I mean, obviously you're already over there, so it wasn't as pertinent. But I can say, what's your draft number to a 70-year-old man, and he'll say 228.
Mine was 239. I just recalled 239.
As you're growing up, you're in high school. You're going through the 60s. You've witnessed, a terrific and terrifically tragic era in American history. How much was Vietnam a part of your consciousness or worldview before you ever went over there? In other words, did you follow it and oh my God, I'm getting ready to graduate. That's probably where I'm going to go, that sort of thing? Is it something that you were monitoring, tracking?
Not at all. And if you would have asked me in 1965 when I joined the service where the military was serving, I didn't know we were in Vietnam. Secondly, I didn't know on the globe where Vietnam was. I couldn't have pointed it out, we studied geography, but I must have slept during that course, I did not have a clue where Vietnam was, and nor would I care because I had no intention of going there. But little did I know.
You are listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. It's presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmond Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. Our guest today is Doc Ballard. He received the Medal of Honor for his heroic actions in Vietnam. So it's May 16th, 1968. I'm going to guess you woke up like any other day. Didn't know that was about to happen. I've read I brought it here so I could refer to it, your Medal of Honor citation. I also watched the video that you did. You looked smashing in your mustache, by the way, for the Medal of Honor Society. It's a terrific video. Actually, all the videos on there are, I went down a rabbit hole a couple days ago. I probably spent 2 hours on the site. It's incredible. Anyway.
Well, if you recall, I was much younger, but that was early in my career, and I still had the 2,000-yard stare. If you notice the film, I wasn't there. I was talking, but my eyes were way out there. I was trying to recall the events without thinking about it. I was answering the question without reliving it. If that makes sense. And I've had to live with that ever since because everybody that comes across my path wants to know, well, how'd you get the medal? Oh, I got it at Walmart.
You can't even get, I have a Meritorious Service Medal lapel pin, right? So you can order lapel pins online and stuff like that. But for Medal of Honor recipients, you have to have a card. You can't just order a lapel pin or a medal.
Well, since the Stolen Valor Act, you're not allowed to manufacture or transport, own, possess the Medal of Honor if you don't have proof that you're a recipient. You can't sell it. They confiscated all of them that we had at the time. When I joined, there was 429, if I'm not mistaken, living recipients, but there was over 600 imposters.
Oh.
So everybody wanted to be the Medal of Honor recipient, but they didn't want to serve to get it, you know. So the stolen valor was something that we emphatically wanted to squash, and a lot of our guys signed on to do what we could to put an end to the stolen valor, you know, because we earned it. Not in just the medal, any medal. I'm talking about even the Purple Heart, because even the VA came out and said that they were getting a bunch of phonies applying for benefits.
Really?
Sure. They had to vet them, and that's a big part of, you know, how do you vet? That's why it was so hard for Vietnam guys to qualify for benefits, because they had to vet themselves to the nth degree, not only of the service connection, but the incident that they're claiming happened, you know, the injuries.
I read a book recently about the Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb. And one of the points made by the author is that the United States is still, to this very day, using the Purple Hearts that were minted in anticipation of the invasion of Japan. That's how many casualties they expected.
When in 2000, not 19, but 2008, I became a funeral director. And I learned at that time we were still using the military caskets that were prepared for Japan.
Oh. May 16th, 1968. I'm not going to ask you any questions. I'm just going to say, if you could take us back to the extent that you want to that day, in as little detail as you want. That was the day you acted so heroically. I can't imagine doing what you did.
I can't imagine it either. If I think back on that day, it was my daughter's birthday, May 16th. And I woke up with the idea that, you know, I wish I could tell her happy birthday. So I had that in my mind, and you know, we started right out with a gunfight, and we ended in, you know, we had to move out and went from point A to point Z with all the checkpoints in between, the alphabet, and the whole battalion went online, and I was able to fit in the middle of it because I was a corpsman. The Marines, you have to understand that Marines love their docs. And they called us doc because they couldn't spell corpsman.
I like that.
Yeah.
Both my parents were in the Marine Corps. They're both dead now, but if they were alive, I would certainly repeat that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, if there's any listeners out there that are Marines, if I tell a joke, I'll tell it slow and twice. I can pick on the Marines because I damn well can. You know, I earned that right. The Marines and their corpsmen has no greater love than their combat buddies. And, you know, I obviously was willing to risk my life for the Marines, and they protected me likewise. No greater love. So to finish the story, or at least continue until I get interrupted again, would be to understand that we were on a battalion move, and we were going from different positions, and we had some new troops that had just joined us 2 days before, and the morning, one day before, 3 different people, and 2 of them fell out from heat exhaustion. You know, just they hadn't got acclimated to the environment over there, so they were a burden, and we needed to get them back to the rear where they could get treatment. So we set up a hasty LZ, and there was 6 Marines and myself and the 2 patients, and we called in the helicopter, medevaced them out, and then we looked around, and the unit had already moved out. We're standing there with 7 of us in enemy territory with no defense. So that made us pucker a little bit, and so we thought we better get the heck out of the area. So we tried to find where the unit moved out to. So we followed the trail the best we could. And then we finally caught up with the end unit, the last unit of the march. So as they would stop and take a break, then we would continue walking through that unit to get up to our unit, that company. So we never did. I never got to my unit that day, because they were attacked. They were ambushed and had several casualties. And the people that I treated were not even in my unit. They were just Marines, and of course, that's my unit, being with the Marines. So I was actually treating Marines that I didn't know. And the only people I knew in that whole outfit were the litter bearers and the radio operator that helped me medevac the heat casualties. So it took me, my job was simple, go out and get the Marine. It didn't care what his name tag was. He was an American wounded, and the corpsman was summoned as Doc or Corpsman up, the Marine Corps battle cry. And so that's what I did. I went out several times. Now, we had moved out, and we'd set up overnight. I joined the unit. We set up overnight, and in a hasty defense posture. And that morning, we woke up to gunfire, and they had attacked us. And when they saw an area that they could penetrate our line, they pushed through the line and just overrun us. So my particular remembrance of that day was the machine gunner that was in front of me got wounded, and so I grabbed my aid bag and I ran down to treat him, and I jumped in the machine gun hole, the pit, and was working on the guy when the second machine gunner, who was also shot while I was there, and he got shot in the forehead, small hole going in and a large hole coming out. And so it blew him back over on me. And this is tough for me because...
You stop whenever you need to stop, sir.
I'm going to do the best I can. So it was maybe 5 seconds to 6, 8 seconds. Who knows? Might have been 4 days. I don't know. I lost track of time. But the enemy came over us. They literally walked through us. There were 6 of them. 5 of them were picking up our machine gun and all our ammo and the food and everything. And the 6th person was standing about 2 o'clock with his at the ready, watching us to make sure we didn't move or cause any kind of problems. Well, when everybody moved out, that SOB shot all 3 of us again. So I laid there playing dead and had to watch him shoot me. He shot me in the stomach. Luckily, didn't shoot me in the head. And I must have reacted in such a way as it made him think I was dead. So he walked away. I was able to push the dead person off of me because his brains was all over me. When he fell back, his brains came out of the helmet, which landed all over my face, so it made me look like I was injured pretty good. Imagine. I couldn't see myself. But so I pushed him off, and the only thing I had on me was my knife, and it was in my boot. So I knew I had to get behind where the enemy had gone because now they're shooting our people from a different position. So I get up there, and the man that shot me was going through my food. And now he didn't see me or hear me coming because of all the gunshot and all the activities and everything. So I jumped on him, knocked him flat on the ground, and I slit his throat. I laid there on top of him until he could bleed out. So that's how my day started. We were able to pull out and regain and help. The Marines were able to kill all the people that had entered our compound. So we had gathered up the bodies and the living, and my job at that point became to go out and get to treat the wounded. this was early on. We weren't picking up bodies at that time. We were still engaged in battle. So my job was to go out and get and treat the living. And that's what I did. And I would fireman carry the person back to a clearing station. It was a bomb crater is what I had identified as a safe place. So I went out, got the guy, brought him back in, and I took him off of my shoulders, and I laid him on the ground. And when I laid him on the ground, I laid him on top of a grenade. It went off, blew both of his legs off. And now I've got another patient. And it also tore the face off of the guy laying behind us. So now I had another patient. So my immediate position was, I saved these two guys. I already saved them once, and now I got to save them again, treat them again. And so I did. I was able to put tourniquets on the guy that lost both legs, and I was able to treat the facial wound. And I went back to treating the guy with no legs. I'd started an IV on him to replace his blood volume. And a Marine hollered at me. He kept hollering, "Doc, Doc, Doc." I turned around, and I saw another grenade. I skipped something there. I need to go back and recover. While I was working before the third grenade came in. I handled 3 grenades, or was involved with 3 grenades. I was working on the guy on my knees, working on putting a tourniquet on, when a grenade came in and hit me in the helmet. I was on my knees, and it hit me and fell down by my knees. And I thought, well, not being a Marine, I didn't stick it in my pocket as a souvenir. I wanted to get rid of the damn thing. So I grabbed it like you would anything else that was dangerous, and I flung it out of the bomb crater, and it went off. So that built a little bit of false bravery, if you will. I mean, nobody picks up a hand grenade, right? But I had no choice, in my opinion. So, again, I'm working on the same guy, and the other Marine started hollering, "Doc," and I turned around, and there's the third grenade that was just a little bit out of my reach. So I turned to grab it, and I realized I couldn't, so I got up off my knees, and I lunged for it, and by that time I knew it was going to blow. And so I pulled it up underneath my chest, thinking something incorrectly. I thought I was going to be able to survive it, or I didn't know what was going to happen. But, I was motivated to try to save those other men that were laying there and my patients, So I had epiphany because God talked to me. Jesus Christ called me himself and said, "Boy, you're not too smart. You better get rid of that thing." So I rolled up on the guy without any legs, and I flung it in the air, and it went off in the air. Now, the citation says I failed to go off, and I just calmly arose and continued to treat the patients. But the truth is known is, if Paul Harvey was here, he would tell you that when you holler grenade, everybody buries their head. And so nobody saw the actions that I took. I'm the only one, between God and myself. I'm the one that, the only one that could make any kind of difference there. So for me to have taken action was, my opinion, the right thing to do. And so, I never considered I was trying to commit suicide. Never entered my mind. I had just seen the guy, what the grenade did to the previous person. It just blew his legs off. Well, no big deal. I mean, it's a big deal. But, maybe, he lived through it, and I got him off the hill that day alive. So he was in shock, but he was still breathing and still alive. So I thought maybe I could survive it too. I didn't have time to really concentrate on my options. It was one of those times when you just have to instinctively do something. It's like you don't think about it. And so that's what I did. By jumping on the grenade and then rolling over and throwing it away. I'm blessed that, the good Lord was on my side and there to watch after me. And secondly, I claim that the enemy were using Chinese communist grenades, and they got them at the dollar store. So that's the only thing I can laugh about today, because it's a sad story in my life, and I use humor to deal with my PTS. And that's my story, and I'm going to stick with it.
In its own right, it is a fabulous, although tragic, story. You mentioned about a minute ago that no one saw these actions.
Correct.
So then how does the process start for the Medal of Honor, I guess, review, awarding? Well,
you have to be, the story has to be told, and you have to be put in for an award. I didn't learn any of this until I went to my first reunion with my group. And if you're listening out there today, thank you, Marines. But I went to my reunion, and I met the battalion commander. And the colonel was telling me the story. And he related a story that some Marine had written me up, and they were processing that. And it's also important to know that each level, it could be chopped. If a sergeant didn't like you, there was a prejudice or maybe a misunderstanding between the two of you, he could have said no. The staff sergeant could have said no. The first sergeant could have said no. The lieutenant, all up the chain of command, any level could have said no. And for that to get that high to the battalion, I had no opposition. Everybody loved their docs, right? So again, I learned all this, 10 years later, and the colonel related a story that he had to impress upon the major in the rear with the gear that he called down there and said, "Where is that? I haven't seen the story. Did you forward it under my signature block?" And the major said, "Well, is the corpsman alive? Was he dead?" And the colonel related the story that he said, "No, he's right here with me right now. I mean, he's here. He's still alive." And he said, "Well, did he get wounded?" No, not to my knowledge. He did not get wounded. And the major said, "Well, we don't give corpsman awards, for doing their job. And besides, you didn't even get wounded, So now this is what the colonel's telling me, and I'm sitting there in awe thinking, what happened? And then the colonel said, Major, I'm going to come down there with my number 10 boot and stick it up where if you don't submit that forward. He says, you get your butt out here and interview the troops. And he says, after the interview, you report to me. And so he flew out there unbeknownst to me and met with the witnesses, who said that, yes, they saw me jump on the hand grenade, but they didn't see me get off of it. They didn't see me do anything. They just assumed that it didn't go off because, I got up and started treating the Marines. So Paul Harvey would have explained the difference, and explained what I explained was I was able to throw it away, and it did detonate in the midair without causing any injuries.
Were you put in for like a Silver Star or a Distinguished Service Cross and it got upgraded, or were you recommended for the Medal of Honor from the beginning?
It was either Silver Star or Navy Cross. And it got upgraded. And again, not knowing what I'm talking about, or then especially, I wasn't even aware that I was put in for it. The colonel related that, it was going to, he thought it was going to be a challenge getting it through because I wasn't even wounded. Because most Medal of Honor recipients get wounded or killed. The majority of them get killed. And that day, I had been wounded 8 times while I was in Vietnam, but that day I did not receive any injuries at all. So I had several things against my action. I was alive, I wasn't even wounded, and I was a corpsman. I didn't deserve it.
We have a few minutes left with Doc Ballard, who received the Medal of Honor for his actions in Vietnam, May 16th, 1968. Fast forward, you're at the White House. You're with Nixon and the other recipients that day, other people being honored. Small town boy, now he's in the White House talking to Richard Nixon.
Yes, and, we were raised to be respectful of the White House, no matter who the president was. I enjoyed Nixon. I'd followed him, but I hadn't voted yet. He would have been my first president to vote for, and I just come out. As a matter of fact, I was still in the service. To come to think of it, I was in between services, and I was getting out of the Navy, going into the Army when I was called to the White House. So it was an honor to meet Nixon. I mean, he had a tremendous heritage. He'd done a lot for our country, and it was he's the president of the United States. And I'm just a kid. E5, talking to 4-star generals, and the president of the United States. That was that was pretty serious stuff, and it was the highlight of my career as well as my life. So,
you received the medal in 1970 at the White House. Was that before or after the Kent State incident?
I think it was before. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. I'm not sure about that.
Let me ask you the same question I was fortunate enough to ask Sergeant Davis. Is there? I mean, these stories are. If you go on the Medal of Honor website, you just are mesmerized by them. Sit there with your mouth open, going, "You got to be kidding me." I asked Sammy, "Is there someone else's medal story, like what person X did to receive the medal, that he finds like, oh my God, I did what I did, but what this guy did is just unbelievable." Is there another Medal of Honor recipient who admire maybe a little bit more?
That's a tough question because I admire all of my brothers. I could find good with every one of them. That I first of all didn't believe I should have gotten it. I was just doing my job. Some of these guys that went out and actually killed the enemy and saved the lives of so many people. There's several people I could name. But in fear of not naming them all, I'm not going to name any one particular one. But I'm in love with the guys that I serve with, and I'm just respectful that I had an opportunity to meet them and join their ranks, and I've spent the rest of my entire life, just like the purpose I'm up here this weekend, or this week actually, is to serve the veterans to the best of my ability. I've always said, and still believe today, it's harder to wear the medal than it was to earn it. And I want to be remembered for what I've done since that day, that one day in combat that changed my life forever. So now I have to live up to it. And I've started different organizations. Again, I'm up here to help the Legion because I want to give back. I want to continually pay it forward and pay respect and honor to the veterans.
You mentioned something when we were discussing in the first half of the podcast, we have just a few minutes left, about Vietnam veterans helping subsequent generations, like lifting them up. And I remember reading an article several years ago, it may have been a couple decades ago, that recipients like you and others, especially from the Vietnam era, were saying that there aren't enough of these being awarded, that a lot of them are being downgraded, and no, but this guy did, he should get it. Is that something that A, is true, B, you think is necessary? I just thought it was one of the most unselfish things I'd ever read, where it's like, okay, we can keep this clique really small, or we can help the people behind us get their due recognition.
Good point, because as a recipient, we have no say in what and who gets the medal. We avoid that not only by reason that you can imagine, but by Congress. We're not allowed to voice an opinion. So, no, we have nothing to say about that. And there are plenty of people that deserved the medal that didn't get it. No witnesses, for instance, or the Marines broke all their Crayolas. They wasn't able to write it and document it. And so, no, I could have written several people up if I had my Crayola. I could have done it. But it's so easy just to overlook it and say, well, he was just doing his job, or maybe he was unlucky. it takes an effort to want to write somebody up and follow it through. So, no, but the society, Medal of Honor Society that we belong to, and the individual recipients have no say in recommending or disapproving any applicant for that award.
Is there a Vietnam War movie that gets it right, or do you eschew watching them?
No, I watch all of them. I couldn't in the beginning, but we were, Mel Gibson's movie. It was one that brings home, We Were Soldiers. I think it was We Were Young and...
The book is We Were Soldiers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And young.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I knew 3 of the recipients that were featured in that movie. Joe Marm was on the ground, and I knew Bruce Crandall and Ed Freeman were the helicopter pilots. And, when you know the people in the movie, it brings a relevance as well as realization that, especially talking to them and say, well, how much of that was real and how much of it was Hollywood? And, it's they're 2 of my heroes. They're all 3 of them are my heroes, for the actions that they did. But again, I don't single any of them out because they're all my heroes. And can we talk about?
Yes, please do.
Well,
I was going to ask you one more time about your visit to Indianapolis, and then we asked the same 5 questions of all of our guests.
Oh. Well, the purpose of my visit here today is to help the American Legion Post 500 develop a new post. And hopefully we'll be able to change the entire attitude and appearance of the American Legion to attract the younger veterans so that they would feel welcomed and feel like they're going to get some benefit. Too many times these kids come to a meeting and they're turned off with the drinking and the smoking and storytelling, and especially when they don't have any stories and they haven't been around long enough to make them up like the rest of the veterans have. So, it's adverse environment. So we're trying to change all that and better put it into place, a better education theme for the Legion itself. I think everybody, including suicide victims, need a sense of purpose. There wouldn't be suicide if we had a sense of purpose for that person. The American Legion has done tremendously great things for our veterans, but they're not doing it what they used to do. There's, it's pretty well all done, maybe, and I don't know that that's a true statement because we're always trying to improve the relationships and the quality of life. But the American Legion needs a facelift, and we're here to do that, and we're here to encourage recruiting of the new veterans. We have my particular foundation's the triumphantspiritfoundation.org. They'll be able to go there. Your listeners can look up what we're doing. This building a new facility here across from the racetrack. We have plenty of opportunity for people to get involved and show their support, and we want them to come down and join the American Legion. That's what we're about. Come down. It's not going to benefit me. I live in Kansas City, but it will benefit the veteran and hopefully maybe prevent a little suicide thoughts if they can get back around the camaraderie and the brotherhood that they had while they were on active duty. We have very little suicide on active duty. It's usually when they come home and they're lost. They don't have the camaraderie. They don't have the relationships and the brotherhood and people to talk to and self-confidence. And so we're trying to instill all that. And we're trying to raise money now to build that relationship. We've got a lot of ways for people to come and get involved. We're even selling bricks, for to help build the new facility. kissabrick.com sounds kind of crazy, but it's meant to recognize heroes that served our great country, and Kiss a Brick can be a household name on honoring your family member by being part of a growing new trend in the American Legion.
I need to buy some. In 4 generations of my family, there are 17 veterans, so I'll be buying some bricks.
Outstanding. And 100% of the money goes to support Post 500 and its endeavors. And we're using Post 500 as kind of the jump-off pilot project. And maybe national will look at that, and we'll be able to someday take it nationwide, with character development and youth education. We want to get back to patriotism. We're lacking a lot in this country, and patriotism, in my opinion, is one of the largest things that we can educate people and at least attempt to, and take responsibility for your actions and, just be, as I stated earlier, we put the blame on the parents because they failed to teach the importance of Americanism. And that's what we're all about, is teaching Americanism and patriotism.
We have reached the point in the Leaders and Legends podcast where we ask the same 5 questions. This is very quick and very easy. All our guests. Doc Ballard, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Do you need a Marine here to help you with these answers?
No, I don't need any Marines today.
What was your first job?
In my life?
Mm-hmm.
I worked at a skating rink. I learned how to roller skate, and I worked as a skater. Roller skating at different parties and helping the kids.
What was your first concert?
It would have been a military band that came through town, and my parents took me to a military concert, and that also got me excited with joining the military.
You never saw Strawberry Alarm Clock or the Guess Who?
Oh, you said my first, though.
Mm-hmm. Like a big kind of like rock concert or something other than the band.
Your
answer's fine. I was pushing a bit.
It doesn't sound fine. You're trying to push me in a different direction.
Well, you don't have any Marines here to help you.
I'm not a big rock star. I'd rather throw them than listen to them. Question
number 3. If you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you choose?
If the first one would be the Bible. I think the second one would be 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Question 4. If you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
That's difficult. I've lived too long. A lot of events. I think I would like to be on the USS Missouri when the Japanese surrendered.
September of 45. I thought you may choose being back in the United States on May 16th, 1968, so you could celebrate your daughter's birthday with her.
I would have liked to. That was not an event that I could support.
Witness blowing out the cake. Last question. If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record to talk about anything you want, whom would you choose?
President Trump.
You have been listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. It's presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmond Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister, a veteran of World War II. Our guest today has been Doc Ballard. He received 3 Purple Hearts and also the Medal of Honor for saving the lives of his fellow Marines and human beings. You were very generous with your memories and your time today. Good luck on your mission, the latest mission for you. Please let me know how I may be helpful, and thank you.
Buy bricks.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.
This podcast was produced and edited by Chris Spangle and Leaders and Legends LLC. If you're interested in starting a podcast or taking yours to the next level, please contact us at leadersandlegends.net.